Warning! This episode contains foul language, graphic descriptions of murder, and discussions of suicide, incest, and sexual abuse.
Hi, weirdos! You are listening to Keep It Weird, the podcast for all things strange and unusual, for all things bloody and crusty, and for all things that make you say, oh my god, everyone knows the husband did it. This week, we're heading back to the glamour and the glitz of Hollywood, but this time we're focusing on the dark side, the back alleyways, the handbags in the gutters, the scariest of scandals that Hollywood tried to cover up with the flashing lights of the paparazzi. This week, we're talking murder. How many young starlets and up-and-coming auteurs have lost their lives pursuing their dreams in Tinseltown? Was the dog-eat-dog world of Hollywood itself to blame? Today we're discussing 3 incidents that aren't quite what they seem. So check your rear window and dial M for murder. My name is Ashley and this is my co-host Lauren.
Hello, weirdos.
And we are once again joined by our good friend all the way from the Big Apple, Mr. Mike Johnston.
Thanks for having me back, guys. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yay.
It is
We're
a
so
pleasure.
happy you're back.
We've all got a tasty alcoholic bev.
Feeling good, feeling right.
We sure do. I was actually taking a sip when you said bloody and crusty and thought I missed my cue.
Oh my god. Bloody and crusty. Those are quite the adjectives.
Celebrating getting through another Monday.
Mm-hmm.
One thing... I had to take a sip. Mike, one thing I wanted to talk about before we get into it. Do you remember that time you mailed us signed copies of Campfire by Jean Spangler, and I thought that I had a stalker?
I don't know if I thought you had a stalker, but I do remember that very sweet gesture.
It was such a sweet gesture.
It was so sweet that you did that.
You sent the book, and for whatever reason, I don't remember why, I didn't see or I didn't recognize the name on the package. I just kind of like ripped it open, but I got this book in the mail, and it's called Campfire by Jean Spangler, and written on the title page, it says, "To Ashley, be careful what stories you tell at night." And I legit was like, is this the beginning of a horror? Is this a threat?
I forget how you found out it was Mike.
You told me.
Yeah, I was like, did you message me? I think you sent me a very cryptic
like,
message.
here's the
Lauren,
thing.
I'm really nervous. I got this book. I was like, that's Mike Johnston, you fool.
That is too funny.
Yeah.
This is coming back to me a little bit more now. And exciting thing, Sean is actually, I think his second novel is going to be published very soon. He's one of my friends in New York, and he is a young adult horror writer.
I love it.
that.
You'll have to let us know. I'm happy to give him some free press here on the show because
we'll promote the
I
crap
loved
out
that
of it.
book.
Yeah,
Once I
is
got over
super
the
talented.
initial shock.
But it was not from a
once it was
stalker.
confirmed that it wasn't a threat.
Just so funny.
I literally
forgot about
texted
that.
Lauren. I was like, "We might have a problem. I don't know." But
I don't know
let me
how
tell
to
you
bring
about
this up to you, but
Yeah.
we should be a little worried. I was like,
keep your
no.
eyes peeled.
We have got to shut the show down. Someone has my address.
Someone
too
found my
dangerous.
address. And they've mailed me a threat. Another question I had. Do you guys have any all-time favorite Hollywood conspiracy theories? Because remember, they used to be fun. It used to be like Beyonce's a scorpion, Avril Lavigne died and was replaced by a clone, and Richard Gere had a gerbil stuck in his butt. And now it's like they all joined forces with Hillary Clinton and the Queen of England and sex trafficked babies. And it's like, what the
Right.
fuck? But they used to be fun. Do you have a favorite?
I mean, a favorite, I would say that the one I probably heard and thought was the craziest was the one you already said with Richard Gere and the gerbil. I just
That was like left field, man.
I remember being really young when we heard that too, and I was really freaked out.
Yeah, like 1, who made that up? 2,
Right.
who are the people that spread that? 3, why Richard Gere?
Right.
What was the origin of that?
I know. Yeah, that is a very good question.
According
I mean,
to
this
Snopes,
may have to
it's
be
false.
edited out of the episode, but I feel like it used to be a thing that like was a gay thing, like to
Well,
like
yeah.
to like put like homosexuals down and make them be like creepy. It was like they're putting gerbils up their butt. They're not normal people.
No, that was the way I heard the rumor. I was going to say that is that the rumor was that Richard Gere was actually gay and that was what he was into. So he put a gerbil into his butt. And I found out when I was really young and barely even knew what being gay was. So I was like, what? Why? Is he hurt? And I was like so lost. But yeah,
That's
I
so
think you're right.
funny. It's so funny that there's still people that are like, gay? You mean you put rats in your butt? Like, that just have no concept of what it means to be any letter in the LGBTQA. You know
There's
what I
truly
mean? It's
no
just
clue.
like,
A lot of people from my high school, you just described them.
I know. I am gonna look it up. I mean, not right now. We have things to do, but I'm gonna do some research on this because I really want to know, like, who started this? Like, was it a magazine? Was it like just
where
like
did
a
it come
lady
from?
in the street who said it, and like someone was like, "What?"
And also, to answer your question from
Yeah.
my point of view, I feel like we've mentioned this one on the show before, but I really enjoy the theory that Katy Perry is John Benet Ramsey.
Yeah, that's a big one. And
one of
literally
my
the
faves.
only thing is that, like, if you put their pictures next to each other, they look like each other. And it's like,
Right.
I mean, kind of.
A little bit, but then, yeah, if you dig into the rest of Katy Perry's past, it's like none of this makes
There are
sense.
pictures of her when she's a child, so that
I
kind
know.
of.
But it just makes me giggle. The way people tried to connect the dots and, like,
Yeah.
reached, I give them props.
Because that's
you
the
know?
thing, that would be cool.
It'd be
So
really
it was like,
freaking
by the
cool.
way,
That would
this-
be so crazy.
This girl that you've mourned over for however many years is actually still alive and doing quite well,
Yeah, thriving.
thriving.
Has a baby.
I kind of like the conspiracy theory that Stevie Wonder isn't blind.
Oh, yes. I have heard that one a lot.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, can you imagine?
That he's just been tricking us all this whole time.
Yeah, or just like what a weird thing to commit yourself to for all of your life.
Agreed.
Seriously.
Yeah. It's big commitment.
Yeah, and there are some things. There's videos online of people tossing him things and him catching it. And there's a video of a mic stand falling over, and he grabs it before it falls and resets it.
Uh-huh.
But you have to think of how we do that as people. How, like, something will be falling off the shelf behind us, and we'll, like, reach our hand out and all of a sudden catch it and be like, how the fuck did I do that?
Right.
I didn't even see it. I just, like, felt it falling
Knew.
and, like, went and grabbed it. And it's like, I didn't, I don't claim to be blind, but I didn't see it fall. I just had, my body just did what it was supposed to do.
It's like something in your senses was tingling, and like his other senses besides sight are absolutely heightened. So
Yeah.
maybe that's how he does it.
Well, and also,
Totally.
you don't have to be fully, completely can't see anything in the entire world to be declared legally blind.
Right.
He can see
That's true,
shapes,
too.
maybe. I don't know. I haven't talked to him about it recently.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is probably not. We don't need to like go into the mechanics of or to the depths of which Stevie Wonder is blind. But I do know that like my mom, I think, is like legally blind in one of her eyes, but like she's still a fully able like to do things person. Like she can drive, she can do all those normal things, she can still read, but she is legally blind in one eye.
Oh, I didn't know that about Kim.
Yeah, good old Kim.
So today we're talking about murders in Hollywood. This is a subject we have covered before, but we've got a whole... I'm pretty sure all 3 murders are from, like, way back when. We're not covering anything recent.
I was thinking that. I'm like, we kind of went
kinda
old
cool.
Hollywood on
Yeah.
accident. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going way, way, way back. You're going to start us off with a guy named William.
William
I had to
Desmond
scroll.
Taylor. Yeah, we are going real old school with this one. We're going back to the 20s. So are you guys
Damn.
ready to travel back with me?
Yes.
You feeling it? Okay.
Entering destination code.
I was gonna say
1920.
I'm gonna put like the Doctor Who music in here, like who is?
Yes.
Here we go.
As we travel back in time. Okay, let me set the scene. Late on the night of February 1st, 1922, a woman was coming back home to her bungalow in the Westlake neighborhood of Los Angeles. You guys may have heard of it.
Yeah.
And noticed her next-door neighbor's light was still on. The man who lived there, William Desmond Taylor, was a very famous director in Hollywood at the time and was known for burning the midnight oil. So it really wasn't crazy that he would be awake and his light would be on. So she forgot about it, went home. But early the next morning, the woman awoke to a horrific scream coming from one of the neighbors.
Oh, God.
Excuse me. Oh, I'm choking on my spit. Okay. A horrific... That was a bad one.
That was so dramatic. Go on.
It was. I mean, I'm a dramatic person.
That's what happens in the 1920s.
That's true.
What happens.
It's silent film. You got to be real over the top.
The next morning, the woman awoke to a horrific scream from one of the neighbors saying, "Mr. Taylor is dead. Mr. Taylor is dead."
Yikes.
It was being shouted by a man named Henry Peavy. Henry Peavy was Taylor's cook and valet, and he was screaming, "Mr. Taylor is dead," as he ran up and down the courtyard of the apartment buildings. Peavy had arrived at work in the early morning hours and saw that William Desmond Taylor was lying face down on the floor. He had been shot in the back, but he didn't realize this right away. Neighbors would recall hearing what they thought was a car backfiring around 9 p.m. the night before, and one couple, alarmed at the sound, had even looked out their window to see what was going on, and they saw a man leaving Taylor's home. It was a very small man with an effeminate walk, was the exact description that they gave investigators later, which will come in handy as we discuss more. Before police were even called, this is how bullshit Hollywood was, and still honestly is, because I think this stuff happens, but before the police were even called, the studio was called by Peavy, Henry Peavy.
Oh, yeah.
This assistant.
Right.
Like, nope, not going to call in detectives. I'm going to call the studio to make sure this is all okay. So,
Yeah, they did shit like that all the time. Like when Reeves was shot.
yes, exact same thing.
Yeah, they called the studio.
It's like, let's check for a scandal. Let's see what's going on.
Yeah, just to make sure, like, if we have to cover something up, like,
Right.
we can.
It's just so crazy to me, but yes.
You
so
know
Peavy
that
calls.
still happens.
I know,
right?
that's why I was
It
like,
has to.
it was back in the day, but I 100% think this still happens, especially if you're, I don't know, if like the specific person that was found, like, was up to no good, and they're probably like, oh shit, we gotta sweep the apartment first and get this stuff out of here.
Well, that's the thing with, like, I think it was Heath Ledger. Heath Ledger was found by a masseuse, but he was in one of the Olsen twins' hotel room.
Oh yeah, Mary Kate.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
like,
because they were like dating for a while.
and everyone was wondering if she provided him with the drugs, or there was like this
Right.
whole thing, and I was always wondering like what the exact story on that was, but you know
I
what?
and we
It's
never
none of my
really
business.
learned. Yep.
Oh,
So,
I'm sorry.
studio execs wanted to come in and sweep the home for anything that could have caused a scandal. Hollywood was already under fire at this time because there were a lot of toxic men in the industry.
Oh,
Again, not much has changed. but they wanted to get ahead of it. So after the sweep and going in and collecting things that they thought would cause up a stir, the police were finally called a few hours later. Everyone actually believed it was a natural death at first. Like I said, they couldn't tell that it was a gunshot because there was no sign of struggle. He was laying very calmly on the ground. But once the body was finally lifted up, a huge pool of blood was revealed under his chest, and blood had been dripping out of his mouth. And then they found the gunshot in his back. A suspect list was drawn up by the police, and it literally sounds like a movie. Like the way it's described, it was a threatened stage mother, drug dealers, a love-torn teenager, and possibly members of a gay opium cult.
Okay,
You
sure.
heard right.
I mean,
Yep.
I'm sure they were around.
They were around. They were kicking.
Who knows what they were into? Gerbils
Yeah, probably into gerbils. That's how
Opium.
Richard Gere learned about
and
it.
murder.
The
Gays
usual.
of 1920s Hollywood.
Oh. So all of Taylor's vices start to surface. All of his private life starts to come forward. There was pornography that was found in the bungalow. There was a collection of women's lingerie, and I'm like, okay, who was in charge of doing the sweep?
Yeah.
But also, who cares? But who was in charge of doing the sweep? Because I feel like they found porn, and immediately everyone was like, he's disgusting.
Yeah.
I mean, like, also, I know we're saying who's in charge of the sweep, but also maybe it was a plant.
Oh,
Mike Johnston.
Oh.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I like the way you think. Okay. So they find some porn, they find some women's lingerie, and also stories start to come forward from family members and people who knew him before coming to Hollywood, and we all learn that Taylor had completely abandoned a wife and daughter back in New York.
Whoa.
He had told them that he was going to pan for gold in Klondike during the gold rush and bring back a bunch of money, but guess what? He never came back.
Oof.
He just disappeared and never returned, and his family just had to sit and wonder if he would ever come back to them, if he had died, what was truly going on. There was just a dead end. They had no clue. Wow. His wife and daughter found out that he was in Hollywood because they went to the movies one day and he was on the screen.
Can you imagine?
Right?
I would be so mad.
I don't even know what I would do. I think I would get up and start like stabbing the screen with whatever I could find in my purse and just like rip open the movie screen out of anger, because I can't even wrap my head around that you think, should I be mourning my husband? Like, did he get kidnapped? Is he dead? Where is he?
No, he's living the life.
Yeah, he's rich and famous in Hollywood and dating a million women, and I can't. So that was how they found out, sitting with absolute shock in their seats. So people are starting to find these things out, and there wasn't a very pretty picture being painted of old William Desmond Taylor. So again, this murder started to unfold basically like a movie script with all of the people involved. So the police are starting to question everybody. The last person to see Taylor alive was Hollywood it girl at the time named Mabel Normand. It was rumored that Desmond Taylor was madly in love with her, but a lot of others argued that he was gay and actually was involved in a lot of underground gay club activity. So nobody was really sure what his sexuality was, or maybe he was bi or what he was up to. But it was the biggest news story was that he was hanging out with Mabel Normand. Norman was addicted to cocaine at the time very heavily, and Taylor had tried repeatedly to help her get treatment. Eventually, he went straight to the source, attempting to report her dealers to the police.
Oh, my God.
And they weren't into that. So one of the biggest theories is that Taylor had been killed by someone in the drug ring in an attempt to stay free and stay out of the police's eye, which I honestly, as soon as I read that, was like, well, yes, I 100% think that's what happened.
Maybe things were different back then, but like who in the world would be like, you know what, I'm going to report this cocaine dealer? I just feel like, one, that's not going to fix your friend's drug problem, and two, are you insane? I almost said, have you seen movies? But there weren't any yet.
There weren't any
just
back
kidding.
Then. Like,
Maybe
why would you ever go try to deal with a dealer directly? Like, that's only going to get you in trouble. I can't.
Well, what I think is interesting is that to me isn't that shocking. Like, I think when you are dealing with someone with addiction, I think more from like a parental sense, like True. You would do anything to help them. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you would go, if it meant you had to like try to get the person who was supplying them in trouble. Like, that doesn't seem that far like of a stretch for me. But I think it's interesting that, I guess you said he was madly in love with, but you know what I mean? That seems like something you would only do for someone you were like very deeply
that you really
involved with in some capacity.
Yeah. I mean, something had to be going on between them if he was like trying this hard to get her dealers arrested and, you know, like get the cocaine out of her hands. So yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they really were involved. So that is theory number one. Yes, that a drug dealer came after him. Another theory is that the man seen retreating from Taylor's house that night was not a man at all, which again, when the description came out, it was a very effeminate walk, which obviously it could still be a man, but it makes you question, because it was also said that it was like a very tiny man's body, so could it have been just like a short, petite female? But
yeah.
Another theory was that it wasn't a man at all, but it was actually this woman named Charlotte Selby, who was the mother of a teen starlet, bringing back that word.
We love a starlet.
Mother of teen starlet named Mary Minter, and Mary Minter was a protege of William Desmond Taylor. She had been in love with him, but Taylor rebuffed her, saying that their age difference was too crazy, and like he could never give her the time of day. She was a teenager, he was an older man. But rumors were circulating that one of the pieces of lingerie found in his house had Mary Minter's initials on it. Oh. And they were spending a lot of time together, supposedly in a mentor-mentee capacity. But sure. Charlotte Selby, the mother, of course, was making her own assumptions. So Shelby was already this nutty stage mom. She was outraged by the possible relationship. And in the coming years after the murder happened, both of Shelby's daughters, including Mary, accused her of the murder, straight up.
Damn.
Turned on their mother and said, I fully believe she's capable of this. She's a monster. I've seen her do violent things. It's our mother. So she was accused by her own daughters, but there was just not enough evidence pointing to her. Apparently she had some sort of alibi. Back then, I don't know how airtight alibis were. But there's that. So she's another theory that she came after angry about her daughter. Then there is this man named Edward Sands. He was Taylor's former valet before Henry Peavy. He had previously robbed him, already wasn't a good dude, and was fired immediately. And so he was long considered a leading suspect because he had, already crossed this man before. Yeah. But the police were just unable to find this guy. He had vanished without a trace. They did receive an anonymous letter about a year after the crime. It was from a male confessing to the crime, but it was unsigned, no name. They just know it was a man saying that they did it. So there's always been this question of, was that Edward confessing to the crime? Was it just some complete rando confessing? Unfortunately, it is a dead end, but they did receive that letter and always had it in the back of their mind. It was maybe him.
I feel like it's weird to write a confession letter and then not sign it.
I know. Like, you just needed to get it off your back, but didn't quite have the courage to say, signed Edward.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand why, but...
Especially if it wasn't
the letter part for sure happened, right?
The letter part is for sure. Like, police received it. They just have no idea who it's from. They theorized it was from Edward. Apparently, there was, like, a slight handwriting matchup or something, and they thought it felt like him, but it was a total dead end, and no one could ever find the guy, so...
Wow.
They don't know for sure. And then in 1964, a woman named Margaret Gibson, who was a silent film star who had worked with Taylor a lot, as she lay dying in 1964, she asked for a priest so she could confess her sins. And she proceeded to tell the priest and the group of neighbors gathered around her that she killed William Desmond Taylor.
No.
So that totally came out of the blue. And then she died and they got like no further details out of her. So they all just sort of said like, do we believe this? Do we think this is real? Was she even hanging out with William at this time? Like, it was more questions than answers. But they did have this confession that they just didn't know what to do with. Like, they didn't know if they should accept it or not because there was just no more surrounding it. But that was that. And then she just died. So they had a written confession from who knows, this verbal confession from Margaret Gibson, very suspicious motives from other people surrounding. They have Mabel Norman, the lover, they have the two valets, all these things. Different biographies started to come out in the following years professing that they either knew the true killer or were involved in the crime, but no consensus ever emerged saying this is absolutely what happened. And Taylor's murder, unfortunately, was never solved. And, I mean, of course, by this time, never will be.
Wow.
Is there any more info on this old lady who
The
passed?
old lady?
Yeah, the one that, like, on her deathbed confessed.
Only that they worked together, but, like, it's believed that they didn't even really hang out that much outside of work. That's why investigators didn't really know how to take the confession, because they worked together, but they weren't known to, like, party together or hang together. So it was sort of like, what's your motive?
Yeah.
You didn't really
What
have
was
a
her
relationship with him outside of work. Margaret Gibson, silent film star. Are you doing a Google?
Are you doing a Google?
I'm doing it.
I don't know if she's silently Googling on the side right now.
I just can't imagine, like, people who put themselves in a narrative that they're not a part of. Like, that to me blows my mind.
I know, but it happens all the time, which is crazy.
It does.
I know. I feel like that, like, really is nuts. Because, you know, like sometimes people are like, oh, I did this, but really they just meant because of like kind of like a butterfly effect thing. You know what I mean? Like because I didn't go to the grocery store like I said I would, I'm the reason that Harold passed. You know what I mean? Like people do things like that.
Make it about yourself somehow.
Yeah, but like this just seems like, I don't know. Maybe, I think I secretly want it to be her because I want it to be like kind of solved.
I do too. I hate unsolved murders. So I'm like, can we just believe that it was Margaret? I mean, she did know him, so let's go with it. But the crazy thing I just wanted to throw in at the end of this, like obviously the murder was never solved and that's crazy in itself. But also like Mary Minter, the protege, and then Mabel Norman's careers never recovered because of this scandal because so many people believed they were responsible. So they like never got jobs again in Hollywood and they were like frowned upon all because of this, even if they didn't do it. And the incident itself left a huge mark on the Hollywood industry. It was already looking bad because people were claiming that Hollywood was run by cocaine-crazed sexual lunatics and everyone was from Satan, which like Christians say that about Hollywood today too. But conservative political and religious groups were coming forward saying, we need you to start making more wholesome content and, you know, start getting people on a better path, get better storylines, trying to get censorship bills passed. And some of this was actually starting to gain traction because it wasn't just Taylor's murder, but even the year before, silent film star Fatty Arbuckle had been accused of rape and murder, which was a huge...
Did I talk
Another
about
huge
that
scandal
on our last?
I think
Hollywood
you mentioned
episode?
it on our last one with Blair. Yes,
because I know I read about it, but I was like, I don't know if I ever like shared that information. Because that story's wild.
I think we mentioned it in passing. Because I thought about bringing it to this episode, but was like, this all sounds so familiar. So I was like, we won't. But he already, like, Fatty Arbuckle was already its own thing, and then this happened with Taylor, and it was like, okay, we got to crack down. So there was a man named William H. Hayes who was hired by all the studios to help fend off government censorship by creating a self-policing system of do's and don'ts and ways to be careful. And Hollywood thought they could just do it themselves. They don't need to get the government involved. But, of course, Hollywood is terrible at self-policing. So finally, laws had to get a little more harsh. And by 1934, studios had to up their moral standards and required really specific contracts that, like, you basically had to get approval before anything was released. Your script had to be extremely wholesome. There could be zero sex, zero profanity, basically zero anything. They were saying be as boring as possible. And these laws unfortunately passed. And a very conservative version of Hollywood lasted for about 30 years until it started getting slowly back to normal and into, you know, the movies we see today. Obviously, like, anything goes in movies and TV today. You can get away with anything. But there was, like a 30-year like drought where you had to be like so conservative. I think one of the first movies that got hit by it was It Happened One Night. I don't know if you guys have seen that one, but there's a couple who stays in a cabin together and their beds had to be separate and they had to like hang a sheet in between their beds and wear like super, super conservative pajamas, and it couldn't even be like alluded to that they were like changing or like lusting after each other. It was like, it took all the romance out of the movie, and that was how Hollywood had to be because of these things that happened, and careers were ruined over it. It's nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, and things like I Love Lucy, like Ricky and Lucy never could be in the same bed. They were always separated, even though they were married in real life. You know what I mean? Like, they never did that stuff. That's so crazy. I don't think I realized why that was the way it was, and I don't think I realized that it lasted for 3 decades.
My mom always talks about, like, still, because it was starting to end, I think, when, you know, my parents were, like, getting older, but when she was a kid, like, watching TV, she said parents were always separated in different beds, and she just sort of would be like, yep, I guess that's how parents sleep. Weird that my mom and dad only have one bed, but I'll go along with it. And it's like, kids were probably believing that a lot of married couples just slept in their twin beds, when in fact... that was the law of Hollywood.
Well, it also gave us, as people who weren't alive at the time, this like weird image of what life used to be, especially American life used to be, when it was like, it was never like that. Like, they portrayed it that way, but like, it was never like that. Our grandparents fucked like crazy. That's why I have so many aunts and uncles. Like,
they all had like 12 kids. It was so normal to have huge families.
They had sex all the time. I wanted to add some interesting things here about Margaret Gibson from my quick Goog. So the reason that they think maybe if she had killed him, like it could have been about the Arbuckle scandal, because I guess it said, so I'll get back to this, but it says, given her documented arrest record, along with Taylor's reportedly odd remarks in the weeks leading to his murder, I don't know what that means, the inferred motive somehow would have been related to blackmail in the wake of the Arbuckle scandal, during which the private lives of most of Hollywood celebrities easily could fall under highly sensationalized public scrutiny. And that's also when, like, you know, the Los Angeles Times, like all the magazines and stuff, they started to put celebrities on the front. Like if there was a scandal, like that was also that time that was happening. So yeah, apparently she was arrested in 1923. It says 21 months after Taylor was murdered. She was arrested at her home on federal felony charges involving an alleged nationwide blackmail and extortion ring.
Oh gosh.
So I think she was blackmailing
William
people. Well, it says several people. It doesn't like list any like people she actually blackmailed. But she worked in the film industry, and so it looks like some of them were like actors, actresses, producers, etc. So she could have been trying to blackmail him and something went wrong.
Yeah, maybe.
If she was the killer.
She was angry as hell. Yeah. Who knows?
Wow.
Which she could have been, because again, there's a chance that it's a woman. So it definitely could have been Margaret Gibson. Like Mike was saying, I kind of want it to be her, because it's like, she confessed. Let's seal it. Let's do it. But
let's wrap it up. Yeah.
I know.
But you need more than that. I wonder how many people actually confess to Zodiac killings, because it's got to be in like the tens of thousands.
Seriously. And it sounds like that was the case for this guy, too. Everybody wanted to claim the murder. It's bizarre.
Which is strange, because most of us try our best to stay out of jail.
To avoid that. Yes. Yes, we do. And that's the tale of William Desmond Taylor.
Wow, that was a good one.
The starlet.
The starlet.
The starlet. Also, isn't it... Sorry, this is like very side note, but... Like, isn't it crazy to think about? I mean, so, like, if you live in Westlake Village now, right, that's like a trek. Like, that's far. Yeah. The houses are really nice. That's a far ways from, Studios. You know, if you're, like, at the Paramount lot or something like that. Right. So just thinking, like, back then, how far that was to, like, live away. But, I mean, Lucy and Ricky, granted, I'm, like, probably someone's going to rate hate mail that I'm getting the dates wrong. But, like, I know they had a studio, like, in, like, Canoga Park or something, or Chatsworth, I think, where they used to live out there, and that's where they like kind of built their studio. So like maybe that is closer, but that just seems like, I don't know, back in the 1920s, going from Westlake to, you know, Melrose,
no easy
it
feat
seems like that would
you
take
forever.
you all day.
Yeah, cars weren't moving too fast.
I have a tale about a young woman named Jean Spangler. Has anyone heard of Jean Spangler?
Oh, yes. But I don't know all, like, the deets, right. So I'm excited.
So, Jean was a young Hollywood starlet, our new favorite word, in the 1940s. We're in the 40s now. Oh. She was a dancer and a background extra, which seemed like quite the party back then, but also I guess it was a party when we did it, too. Like, actually really thinking about it, it was like all we did was, like, go to set, get off set, drink, and party. But...
drink until like the wee hours of the morning.
I feel like that's like literally how I described myself to people. Like, I'm a dancer and a background actor.
That is you.
And I drink and do drugs on the weekend. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of... I remember those days being very sleepless.
Yes. We were young and we could stay up late and still report to set the next day and do it all over again. 12
to 15 hours. And it's like, if I had to do that today...
Oh, no, I wouldn't survive. I feel like I always describe it as like college part 2. Or like in my case, since I didn't finish college, it was like, it basically was my college experience. Yeah, I was just like partying it up, like made lifetime friends. But yeah, really, it was a party time.
I do highly recommend it for young people.
Yes.
Living in a city, if you're like kind of don't know what you want to do, like totally recommend it, especially if you're new to a city, because at least half of my friends that I've met in LA, I met through background, which is a nice, strong bond.
And you're like fed well if you're on a decent show.
Totally, yeah.
Yes. Crafty was so good on Glee. That is the credit I'll give them.
Even if you weren't on like a super decent show, I was fed better than I was feeding myself at home.
Yeah, I was eating melted shredded cheese off of a plate at home. Mike Johnston is my witness. He saw me do it.
I was witness to that.
He was like, let me buy you lunch. This is the saddest thing I've ever seen. But yeah, and also, that's how Ashley and I met, which was really cute.
That is
being
cute.
extras.
Yep.
Also, a quick story about my experience as an extra. I was not one of the
please.
fortunate ones that got to be on that musical dancing show that everyone loved so much.
You would have fit right in.
I feel like my friends were from that show. I just never was allowed.
Never got booked.
I did get a SAG voucher from that show though once.
You did?
Yeah. But a show that I was on that I shall not name, but my favorite pop diva of all time came from.
It's a show.
If you say so.
Are you talking about?
We can bleep all of this out.
Yeah, we'll totally bleep this out. I will bleep all the special parts out because I did a lot.
I did
and
too.
It wasn't until, what was it, last year, Lauren, that I texted you and I was like, wait a minute, that was
And I was like, yes, where have you
I had
been?
no
And you were like,
idea.
I'm sorry. Because
Yeah.
she would walk around set singing all the time. And I remember being like, she has a good voice, but she's kind of annoying because she wouldn't stop singing. It's just so funny.
I mean, I just love her so much.
Yeah.
But
I know you do.
So my experience on that show, because there would be like 4 of us that were over 18 and the rest were children. And I was on that show like very regularly. Like that's the one that like...
You were.
That they sent me to. Meanwhile, you were having filet mignon and they would literally tell us, all right, you guys, the nachos ran out, but we got some bowls if you want to fill a bowl up with cheese. And that was it. Like no chips, no Cheerios, just a push the button and liquid cheese will pour into a bowl. And then they'd be like, it's a walk away lunch unless you want the cheese. And then I would walk to that McDonald's on Sunset and Vine or whatever, Sunset and Argyle, wherever that was, and get the 2 cheeseburger meal. But that was literally... Tyler and Lauren would be like on their BlackBerry with their filet mignon, and I would be like, I don't have service and the cheese machine is out again.
And I'm laughing like it sounds like this is a joke, but these were real text exchanges where I would be on Glee and I'd be like, oh, I'm eating to my heart's content, having the best day. And Mike would be like, I finally just got service. I left the cave. They ran out of food at 9 a.m. I'm walking to McDonald's. I was like, oh no.
Literally.
I forgot
every
that they
single day I
never
was
fed
on that
us.
show.
Even if it was a
Yeah.
location shoot, even if we went away from the studios, they didn't feed us.
Sucked at that. They did not treat you
Were
well.
you guys on, again, like this will probably be cut or I will bleep out, but were you on the day that and got kicked off set?
And me.
Oh, it was you.
It was the 3 of us. It was the 3 of us. We
Mike,
jokingly...
were you there?
No,
He
but it's
wasn't.
funny that Laura was like, and me.
Yes,
No, because Mike,
I
I'm sure I've
remember.
told you this story. Ashley was on set with us, but she
Yeah.
luckily wasn't there for
I
the
wasn't
scandal.
a
but-
troublemaker.
The
And
scandal.
I won't even go into the whole story because it's such a long, dumb story. But essentially, like this PA had become like very friendly with us
A
and
little
was like
too
chatting with us
friendly,
the
to be
whole night.
honest.
Yeah, like was like favoriting us all night, chatting with us. We were joking back and forth. There was sarcasm. There was like digs. Like nothing seemed like we were crossing boundaries because he was giving
was
it to us as much as we were
starting it.
giving it to him. Yeah, he was
So-
like flirting and joking with us. Then at one point, one of us says like, oh yeah, I'm gonna slash your tires tonight so you can't leave. Like, again, I don't even like know how the topic came up, but that was the joke that was thrown out. And he goes, are you serious? And we all think he's joking. So we're like, yeah, we got our knives ready. We're gonna slash your tires, so you better watch out. And he goes, okay, I just needed to confirm that you're serious. I'll be right back. He leaves, goes to talk to one of the head producers, and then somebody walks over and is like, we're going to have to escort you ladies off the lot. And we got kicked off for harassing this PA, even though we were like clearly joking. We don't even know what car he drives. I don't know where he parked.
It was hilarious. I mean, less hilarious for you guys, obviously.
We still got paid. If we had gotten kicked off and they were like, no pay, no nothing, then I would have been furious. But they're like, we'll still pay you for your time here. And I think we only missed out on like an hour.
It was only
and
an
a half
hour.
Of work,
That's the thing. Is
it was like the end of the night.
And I found out you guys still got paid. I was like, God damn it. Why wasn't I standing with them when they said the tire slashing shit?
I know. We got sent home early and we just like opened a bottle of wine, I remember. And I think when you got off, you came and met us and we all just like vented over wine. And we're like, well, we still got paid, but it was such garbage.
I mean, that's like legit crazy.
It really was. Like even the guy who was signing us out at the end of the night was like, yeah, he can be a lot, but we still have to follow our due diligence and let you go. I was like, okay, so we all know this guy sucks, but it's fine.
Well, and like, not that people can't, not that any kind of person can't do damage, but like, have you seen you? Really? You were going to go slash someone's tires?
We all know. I think even the people who listen to this podcast know I would not slash anybody's tires. I am not capable. I'm scared of literally everything.
We're on too, so this isn't even like 30-year-old Warren. We were like baby girls.
Guarantee I was 21.
Like baby girl dresses.
I was 21. Yeah,
because it was a music
Yeah, you're
video.
like, hey, I'm going to slash your tires with my fake ID because I'm just a child.
I know. I was trying to remember. Maybe I wasn't even 21. I was probably 20 with my fake ID and probably wearing like a floral sundress because it was and he's like, this girl's for sure coming after my car. I can't.
Well,
okay.
Anywho, Jean Spangler did background is what we're getting at.
Yeah, 25 minutes later.
And this story is about her strange unsolved disappearance. It was 1949. She was dancing primarily at Hollywood's Florentine Gardens, which will come into play later. And by dancing, I don't mean stripping. It was sort of like a go-go dancer thing.
Okay.
So she nabbed some bit parts in movies like The Miracle of the Bells and The Young Man with the Horn, which I've never heard of either of those, but whatever. But all of her credits are like extra in church, hula dancer, showgirl, etc. So she never quite made it to where she wanted to be as a full named actress on a set.
Right.
Before this, she had been through what the LA Times referred to as a bad divorce and bitter custody battle. She had married a plastics manufacturer named Dexter Benner in 1942. But just 6 months after she filed for divorce, citing cruelty as the reason, which, okay.
Interesting.
But despite being divorced, they actually still had an on-again, off-again relationship for years that actually produced a child, a little girl named Christine, in 1944.
Cute.
And the man, Benner, actually had custody of the child, but after the court battle, Christine ended up with her mom, Jean. So Jean has the child, and at the time, she was living with her mother in the Park La Brea apartments, actually, if you guys know where that is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Been there many a time.
Over by the Grove.
And where is the ex-husband? Where did he go to
He
live?
still lived in LA somewhere, but he wasn't really around.
Okay.
So there was that did happen, the divorce, the custody battle, etc. But that was all pretty much over by this day, Friday, October 7th, 1949. So this was back in 1944, basically.
Okay.
So 5 years later, Spangler left her 5-year-old daughter with her sister-in-law, Sophie, for the night at her Park La Brea apartment. She left at 5:30 p.m. She came downstairs. She asked, like, how do I look? She told her little girl she was going to work, but she said it with a wink to her sister-in-law, which her sister-in-law, to like the day she died, didn't quite understand what the wink was.
Oh.
Because Jean did night shoots and stuff, so it wasn't weird to leave for work at 5:30 p.m., but like the wink, she didn't know what she was supposed to get from that wink.
Right.
From her sister-in-law. So
yeah, bizarre.
Also, just to add, her mom was out of town that week. So Jean's mom, who she lived with, was out of town at the time.
And just really quickly, for those of you that don't know, yes, you do have to leave and be at places at 5:30 p.m., even if you're going to shoot at like 1 a.m. There's just a whole lot of hurry up and wait, and it's really long hours.
Yes.
I just wanted to put that in there.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's the LA way.
We should do an Ask Me Anything episode on background work.
Oh my
Just
God,
get all our
yes.
background friends to come on and tell about their experience.
That would be so
It's actually
fun.
a really funny idea. I'll write it down. Jean called the apartment about 2 hours after she left to ask, how's my daughter doing? And to tell Sophie not to expect her home until the next morning because she would be working a full 8-hour shift. But the Screen Extras Guild confirmed to investigators that Spangler had no call for work that night. So basically, that was her, extras booking.
Oh, boy.
What was ours called?
Cut above.
Cut above.
Cut above.
Yeah, so it was her cut above casting. Cut above basically said she didn't have work tonight, and she wasn't dancing at the gardens. So, when Spangler hadn't returned by Saturday night, Sophie called the police. On Sunday morning, a Griffith Park worker discovered a handbag that the police identified as Spangler's in the Ferndale area of the park. The handle was damaged, possibly a sign of struggle, and the bag contained a note written by Spangler that read, "Kirk, can't wait any longer. Going to see Dr. Scott. It will work best this way while Mother is gone." And that's the last trace of her we've ever found.
What?
Yeah, there wasn't enough evidence to qualify it as a murder case, even though authorities have admitted that they think that's what ultimately happened to her. They said that they found absolutely no sign that she would have skipped town, left her daughter, whom she loved, never spoke to her family again. They definitely don't think she's a runaway, but the fact that they never had any evidence of murder, it was technically a missing persons case, and there isn't even a case file remaining because of that classification. Because it was never classified as murder, so it's not still something that's open and on file.
Well, golly, I need answers.
So sad.
That is crazy. Kirk
It's nuts.
is what it said?
So they did have suspects, and we'll go over them. And if anyone who heard Kirk and went, "Kirk Douglas," don't worry. Everyone thought that. Because he was the best known Kirk in the country at the time, I think.
Right.
He had to be.
Yeah, probably.
Kirk Cameron didn't exist. Had to be
I know,
him.
literally, when you said that, I was like, well, who else is Kirk? Kirk Cameron!
Well, he's the first one that I went to.
Captain Kirk.
Yes, you did.
But also
He was
because we
not
talked
around.
about growing pains last week.
That's true.
Oh, yeah.
No, this was 1949, so everyone thought Kirk Douglas.
Uh-huh.
And Spangler's mother, Jean's mother, remembered her daughter talking about a Kirk that she met on set, but she couldn't recall what studio, what set, what movie, because as you both know, you're on different sets every day. You barely know the who, what, when. God forbid your parents try to keep track of what show you're on.
Yeah.
So she didn't know what set she was talking about. So an actor friend named Robert Cummings, you may know him from Dial M for Murder, informed police that Spangler had told him a week prior to her disappearance that she was involved in a new romance. And when he asked her if it was serious, she said, "Not exactly, but I'm having the time of my life." Now, did she ever work with Kirk Douglas? Yes. And yes, the police did speak to him. They called him and spoke to him over the phone. He had been vacationing in Palm Springs, not the night of the murder, mind you, but he was vacationing in Palm Springs. He told the detective he didn't remember the girl or the name. But then...
Yeah, right.
Then he called back and was like, "Oh, yeah. I was talking to a friend who recalled that she worked as an extra in a scene with me in Young Man with a Horn. He then remembered that she was a tall girl in a green dress and that, quote, I talked and kidded with her a bit on the set, as I have done with many other people, but I never saw her before or after, and I've never been out with her."
Sounds like studio cleanup to me.
Possibly.
I heard that.
The identity of Kirk is still a mystery to this day. No one knows who it is. But yes, there's totally a chance that it was Kirk Douglas because they did work together. She was in this new relationship that was sort of secretive, and she did come home and talk to her mom about a Kirk. Could have been him.
Oh my.
No evidence that it was. Another suspect they had was obviously the husband.
Of course.
Suspect numero uno, husband. And we all know statistically murders are most often committed by a person close to the victim. So, and he was the person that had the most to gain as far as we can tell. that is her husband, or ex-husband, Dexter Benner. He was very vocal about wanting custody of their daughter. When police questioned Dexter, he said he hadn't seen Spangler for weeks, and they couldn't find any evidence to refute his claim. Like, everything seemed to check out. It really didn't seem like they'd seen each other for weeks. He did end up with custody of the girl in a battle against Jean Spangler's mother after she'd been missing for like a year, and I'm sure that was very hard for her. And he left California with his daughter and his new wife, and police never found any evidence he was involved with her disappearance. So maybe not. But
all right,
here's where it gets fun as any murder can be.
Sure.
Another suspect had to be the mysterious Dr. Scott. So Spangler's note referenced to Dr. Scott, although her sister didn't recognize the name, and they talked a lot. At a press conference, Detective Lieutenant Harry Didion confirmed the existence of a physician named Scott, saying he was known to Miss Spangler and her nightclubbing friends. I suppose hinting at the fact that he may have done some procedures for women who like to dance at night.
Okay.
But
all right.
The police never located a Dr. Scott, and every single LA physician named Dr. Scott was questioned. None of them had a Jean Spangler on the books or claimed to know her. So they wondered if Dr. Scott was in fact the kind of doctor the lieutenant was referencing. And for anyone who's not following what I'm laying on so thick, I'm saying that Dr. Scott was a nickname for a doctor who provided illegal abortions to women at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Doctors like George Hodel, who...
So this was probably just like a total, like, nickname, like he was just a mystery man.
Possibly. But do you know who George Hodel is?
No.
He 100,000 million% murdered Elizabeth Short in 1947, and he's the Black Dahlia killer. Like,
oh wait,
no
is this
doubt.
the guy whose son basically was like, it's my dad?
Yeah.
Yes! Okay, well then it's definitely this guy.
I have no doubts that he killed him. At this point of my life, I'm like, that's the Black Dahlia killer. It would be harder to convince me otherwise than to convince me that it's him. Like, I do believe it was him.
I didn't remember that name, but when we were talking about all the evidence that has come up against him, and even his own son saying, I really think it was my father, I 100%
his son
think
and
it's
his
him.
daughter, both of them think it was him, but...
So you think this guy could have been kind of up that same alley?
Well, the thing about the Black Dahlia murder is everyone's like, it was a one and done. No, it was not, because whoever committed that batshit bananas murder, that's not a one-off. That's not something that's like, I'll try it.
Not the way they did it.
No.
It was so, like, down to a science and, like, posed in such a specific way. It's like you knew what you were doing.
And this man, George Hodel, in my opinion, was a serial killer, and he had access to women who could disappear, like young people who moved here from the Midwest, young women trying to be in Hollywood who could very easily disappear without their parents knowing. By the time their parents knew, it would be too late. And women who were living on the streets, obviously, he had access to, but also he had the resources to get away with it. He had the money. He also performed abortions for any cop with the LAPD that fucked around on his wife and had, a problem. So the LAPD were in his pocket. That's, like, documented. That's a fact. Mm-hmm. And I think he killed multiple times. And here's the thing. Spangler's purse was found a quarter of a mile away from the Sowden house, which is a famous LA landmark, and also George Hodel's residence. It was found a quarter of a mile from his house.
Great.
Oh,
yep. I loved the ope.
A popular radio DJ at the time named Al the Sheik Lazar reported seeing Spangler at a Sunset Strip restaurant at about 2:30 a.m. And he was familiar enough with her to approach her to try and say hi. And he said that she appeared to be arguing with two men at a table. And when he approached, the men waved him away. We're basically like, get the fuck out of here. So she was in an argument with two men at this table at 2:30 in the morning, the night that she was last seen.
Dang.
The owner of the restaurant, Terry Taylor, reported seeing Spangler earlier that evening with a clean-cut fellow with a mustache who was about 35 or 40. A gas station attendant working near the Sunset Strip reported a man and woman matching Spangler's description. They came into the station in a bluish, grayish, dark convertible early that morning. The man bought gas and told Rogers that they were heading to Fresno, but as they pulled off, the woman shrank down in the passenger seat and cried out, "Have the police follow this car." And
Whoa.
Rogers did call the police, but by the time they responded, the trail was cold. They didn't know where the car had gone.
Dang flab.
We're not even sure if it was Spangler, but it matched her description, and that's kind of a weird coincidence. But Steve Hodel, who is the retired LAPD detective who actively believes his father is the Black Dahlia murderer, totally believes Jean Spangler was another victim of his father. He says the description of the man that she was seen with matches his dad at the time. That his dad at that time owned and drove a 1936 blackish gray Packard convertible sedan resembling the one that the gas station attendant had described.
Look at that.
That vehicle also matches descriptions of cars leaving the Elizabeth Short crime scene, just FYI. Hodel also claims that his older brother Duncan noted that their father had dated a gorgeous actress type named Jean in the 40s.
Okay, well, come on.
But I do have to say, though, that you have to take what Steve Hodel says with a grain of salt, because he wrote the book. He wrote a very compelling argument that his father was the Black Dahlia murderer. Like, super compelling, hard to dismiss evidence of the things that he found in his father's possession. He was probably totally right. But then he went on to write another book saying his dad was also the Zodiac.
Okay. So, is Steve okay?
Right? Like, George Hodel was like I'm almost positive he was the Black Dahlia killer. There's no way he was a fucking Zodiac killer. Like, there's no possible. It's just
That's
not.
a big ol' reach. That doesn't match.
No. Yeah, so I don't know. Like, for example.
Wait, yeah, Ashley, so what do you think? So you think that, I guess I'm getting a little turned around with the car story. So if she's like shrinking down in the car and she's like, help, police follow this car. And he said they were going to Fresno, which like wherever he said they were going, that is irrelevant really, because they don't have to go anywhere.
Right.
But so you think that was Dr. Scott.
Yeah.
But the one who
Slash
ultimately would
George
kill her.
Hodel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that had been her that was in the car, the woman that matched the description, screaming out for help in the car. And what was going on right now, so if you don't know anything about George Hodel, I highly recommend you go read about it, because that whole thing is so crazy. But he was a surgeon in Hollywood at the time. Like I said, he had the LAPD in his pocket. Like, they have literal recordings of him confessing to murdering one of his old, I don't remember if she was a maid or an assistant or something. Like, literally on tape confessing to murdering her. Nothing was ever done to him. He got away completely scotch-free. And he was a surgeon, and whoever did what they did to Elizabeth Short, I mean, they had to be a surgeon. Like, the cuts were so pristine. They knew exactly where to dissect a body. They knew exactly where organs were. It had to be a doctor. And this guy loved, like, expressionist paintings. He loved, like, literally, you can see the artwork that he had at his home, and it was, like, women in different pieces. Like, not cut up, but, like, sectioned in different pieces. Like, they looked like the Dahlia. It's wild. Like, I know it was him that killed the Black Dahlia. I don't know that it was him that killed Jean Spangler. But there are other reasons why it might have been. So this was just one other thing I was going to say about Steve Hodel, who was the doctor's son, retired LAPD sergeant. He attributed 10 or 11 deaths to his father in like the 40s, in the 30s and 40s in Los Angeles, including Elizabeth Short. And some of them are super compelling. Some of them are like, oh shit, I actually think this might be another Dahlia.
Yeah.
I think this might be it. And then some of them are just like one of them, her name's Jeannie French. In 1947, she was found at a construction site, beaten to death. In a case known as the Red Lipstick Murder. And in Red Lipstick, someone had wrote on her body, "Fuck PD," which to me says fuck police department, right?
Right. That's what I would say.
And underneath that it said Tex, like signed Tex. And Steve Hodel claimed it was BD, as in Black Dahlia, which it's not. It's PD. And he also had no explanation for the Tex part. Yeah. And she was found stomped to death with shoe prints on her body that were a size 6 or 7, and George Hodel's feet were much larger, you know? So it's like...
So it just doesn't
add up. So it's hard to, like, with a grain of salt, if you take what fair. Steve Hodel has to say. He does say, it's my belief that Jean Spangler started dating my dad either in late September or early October. He was arrested for incest on October 6th. And George Hodel.
I'm not laughing at the situation. I just love Mike's reactions. Who was it? George
Hodel very famously raped his daughter Tamar. Again, this is read about him because he's a monster. And really produced a child with her, which is horrible.
No.
Yes. Hi, Ashley here with some new information I learned after recording this episode. So in 2019, DNA testing was done by the podcast Root of Evil, the true story of the Hodel family and the Black Dahlia. It was a simple test, and it showed that Fauna Hodel's parents were not related. So it was finally proven that George Hodel, her grandfather, was not her father. Unfortunately, Fauna had passed 2 years prior, still believing her father to be her grandfather, George Hodel. Her mother, Tamar, had also passed in 2015. She went to her grave insisting that the sexual and physical abuse by her father was real, and also believing he was the father of Fauna. Obviously, there are a lot of elements at play. George Hodel could be the father of Fauna and not actually the father of Tamar, for example. But with both women passed on, it's very unlikely that more testing is going to be done. I'm going to post a ton of links on our Patreon to accompany this episode. It will be free, no donation necessary. It's just a good place to post all this stuff together. So you can find it at www.patreon.com/keepitweirdpodcast if you want to read more about the Hodels and other cases that we discuss on this episode.
How is that child doing?
There was actually a TV show. You didn't see it with Chris Pine and the girl that plays the child is so wonderful. It was on. Hold on. It was on Hulu. Chris Pine.
I'm surprised if it had Chris Pine. I didn't watch it because I adore him.
It was called like We Own the Night or the Night. No, hold on. So it's called I Am the Night. In the early 1960s, a teenage girl looking for her real father and a disgraced journalist seeking closure find themselves drawn into a web of secrets revolving around LA's most infamous case, the Black Dahlia. And basically it's George Hodel's, story. Daughter that they sold, essentially. They literally gave her to someone and was raised.
Well, honestly, I'm glad they did, because she did not need to be in that environment.
Yeah, she probably made it out okay. But anyway, so to finish this story, so he got arrested. George Hodel got arrested for incest on October 6th and bailed out that exact same day. Then the night of her disappearance, which was the very next night, she was seen talking to this guy in the restaurant. They're arguing, and Steve Hodel believes that she knew something, that possibly his father was driven to kill her following an argument over the charges of incest filed by his daughter Tamar.
Yeah.
I don't know. But Stephen Hodel did get clearance to look for forensics at the Sowden house in 2012. He hired a retired police sergeant named Paul Dostey to walk the property with his dog Buster. And during 2 searches in November of 2012 and September of 2013, Dostey recovered soil samples from the basement and the slope behind the house where Buster indicated the smell of human remains. And forensic anthropologist Arpad Voss tested samples and identified the presence of human remains in the soil. And Based on the
Oh.
chemical distribution, he believes human remains most likely could be found in an area slightly adjacent to the Sowden House lot. But an intensive search has never been allowed of the property.
But why?
Well, the LAPD
We must know.
brushed off the findings. The house itself is an LA landmark, I believe. I believe it's a place that's like not allowed to be torn down. It's a landmark. It was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright.
Oh.
It's a beautiful house. One of the
I mean, I'm
America's Next Top Model seasons, they stayed in this house.
Hell yeah, they did.
But so the LAPD brushed it off and we're like, we're not tearing up the house. At the time that this happened, the house was owned by Laura Prepon from That 70s Show and Orange is the New Black.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And
Alex Voss.
yeah, and she actually denied his request to sweep the property, to like tear up the property as well. Like she allowed the initial like search and the sniffing, but like she didn't allow them to like tear up her yard.
So Laura is also covering up the
She
murder,
might be,
is what
is what
Ashley
I'm
is
saying.
saying. Everybody take
What I'm
that.
saying
Laura
is she
Prepon
might
did it.
She no longer owns it, though. The place is now owned by a guy named Dan Goldfarb, who made his money selling weed to pets, which is awesome.
It was not
Hollywood.
what I thought you were going to say.
It's the
But I
weirdest
loved
place
that
in the
ending.
world.
Hollyweird,
Yeah.
am I right?
Now, last thing, another interesting thing to note. Remember earlier I mentioned that Jean Spangler was a dancer at Florentine Gardens?
Yes.
Yes.
So when Elizabeth Short's belongings were found in a dumpster in downtown LA, there was a little brown address book with the name Mark M. Hansen stamped on the cover. And Mark M. Hansen was the owner of Florentine Gardens at the time. And Elizabeth Short and her friends rented rooms from him in his home behind the gardens just when they needed a place to stay. And Florentine Gardens is a nightclub. Elizabeth Short liked those and obviously knew the owner, so she more than likely spent a good amount of time there. And so did Jean Spangler, being a dancer there. So when the day comes that the Sowden house can be properly searched, we may find the body of Jean Spangler. But to this day, honestly, that's the biggest lead we have. Other than that, it's like, I don't know.
I must know what happened.
Was this Mark Hansen guy ever questioned at all?
Oh, I'm sure he was questioned. I know he was
but
questioned.
It just led to nothing. That just felt like such a big thing to be connected to both women, and then it's like, well, guess he's fine.
Well, I'm sure that they're basically trying to say that that's a connection between the two women, and maybe George Hodel spent time there. But Mark M. Hansen, I don't know if he was questioned in Jean Spangler's death, but I know he was questioned in Elizabeth Short's
With
death.
Elizabeth Short.
Yeah. Which
I mean, and maybe he is totally innocent, and it's more that the Florentine Gardens was the connection than him, but that's wild.
Yeah. Yeah, so Elizabeth Short was 1947, and this was 1949.
Dang. I don't think I ever realized those were so close together, because I knew a little bit about Jean Spangler, but obviously you revealed a whole lot, but I don't think I knew they were that close together, and that makes me even more excited, and I can't wait to dig in even more. This is crazy.
I know. I can't wait to read and learn all about this time period and just more about what was going on, because I feel like this is so fascinating. And I must say, you did a great job of presenting that information, Ashley.
Thank
You did.
you. I know the answer from Lauren, but Mike, did you watch American Horror Story Season 1?
With Connie Britton, yes.
Okay, yeah, so, oh shit, who played the Black Dahlia in that? Mina Suvari played the Black Dahlia in Season 1.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
the doctor that owned that house basically was the George Hodel character, how he would take women there and perform
That makes
abortions
sense.
and occasionally rape and murder them. Yeah, so that was the George Hodel storyline.
Yeah.
Got it.
That
I
makes
need
a
to
lot of
rewatch
sense.
that. And now, especially
I would love to
after
rewatch
this, I need
season
to
1.
watch it with that lens.
Right.
I also highly recommend I Am the Night. It was a really compelling story, even without the George Hodel Black Dahlia part of it. Even just the young girl looking for her real. Basically, she finds out she's adopted, and she's 18. She finds out she's adopted, and she just wants to go find her real mother and father. And then to find out that your mother was raped by her own father and your father's your grandfather. Like, that's just
like that.
Like,
I can't even. What do you even do with
what
that?
do you do with that? Like, how do you even want to know? I understand now why so many people who have been, adopted have decided, I don't want to know.
Yeah. Because you sometimes don't want to uncover the truth and see the darkness that is your biological family.
It could be totally nothing, and it could be something like this, where it's like, holy shit.
Yeah, and like kind of circling back to where we first started with these stories, with when they saw him on the movie screen, and they were like, oh my gosh, like he's in Hollywood, he didn't come back. Like, I think me at that moment, a part of me feels like I would be like, well, if he doesn't want to be here, then that farewell. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I don't know if my curiosity or like anger would come up, or if I would just be like, okay, that sucks that you didn't want to be here. See you never. Not interested, Right.
Yeah, if you don't want to be a part of this family, then why should we be investing and worrying about you? Like, good riddance.
Right.
True.
Jeez, oh man.
Yeah, it was a lot. I do still have one more story, but this has already been a long episode, and those were both, like, such heavy stories that I'm like, do we go on, or do we save Thelma for something else? Where are we at?
Honestly, it's up to you. Like, I don't mind having a long episode if you think,
I mean, I don't think it's going to be, like, another 40 minutes. I mean, who knows with us chatting?
True. Maybe if we can behave ourselves.
I guess we can just do it, and if the episode gets too out of control, then we figure it out.
April 2021. Let's just do it.
That's right. Okay, so the final story of tonight is the mysterious death of Thelma Todd. And it would be really great if me and Ashley were cool enough to plan ahead that, like, we went in chronological order. We were in the 20s and then the 40s, and then maybe I would be in the 60s, but we're going back to the 30s. Damn. So I'm really sorry, everybody. I thought maybe we were doing it right.
We did our best.
We tried.
Insert time travel music here.
Yes, as we travel back to 1935. Okay, setting the scene once again, as before. So it's 10:30 a.m. on the morning of Monday, December 16th, 1935. A woman named May Whitehead is approaching a garage where she was supposed to drop off her personal car and pick up the Lincoln belonging to her boss, who was 29-year-old actress Thelma Todd. Todd was a very famous actress at the time in the late 20s and 30s. Some of her well-known movies included, I didn't know any of these. I want to be completely honest and not sound like I'm like Miss Old Hollywood. I had never heard of this woman. I just thought her story was fascinating. She was in a movie called The Bohemian Girl, The Hot Heiress, a movie called Palooka, and many, many more. Go ahead and look her up. Take a minute.
They made a lot of movies back then.
They really did. She was in a lot of shorts, too. I saw, like, when I was looking up some of them, there were, like, little 20-minute shorts she was in, and then feature lengths, and she was all over the place, but she was extremely famous at the time. So May Whitehead, this woman, was Thelma's maid, who was tasked with picking up Thelma's car every morning and bringing it down to the Sidewalk Cafe that Thelma owned. It was a restaurant that she actually lived right above in the Hollywood Hills, and she lived there with her boyfriend at the time, Roland West. So May noticed absolutely nothing unusual about the scene at first. She pulled up and was walking towards the car until she sees her boss, Thelma Todd, slumped over in the car's front seat, still wearing the same clothes she had been wearing on the night of December 14th, 2 nights earlier, when she went to a party at Hollywood's Trocadero nightclub. May said she initially thought Thelma was just sleeping, but she quickly realized when she got closer that something was horribly wrong. Thelma was dead in her car. And although official case records will tell you that she accidentally died of carbon monoxide poisoning, being inside the garage in the running car, this accidental death is highly debatable, and it has been decades since her passing, but numerous theories have developed since then, and rumors were circulating at the time about how she could have actually died, and there just was not enough evidence to prove any of them at the time. So here are the facts we know for sure before we dive into the theories, because I feel like that's important.
Yeah.
So Saturday, December 14th, Thelma went to this party at the Trocadero nightclub, as I said. Thelma was actually the guest of honor. It was thrown for her by some friends, and for the vast majority of the night, she seemed to be having a great time. Nobody noticed anything crazy. During the party, Thelma did have a brief encounter with her ex-husband, Pat DiCicco, who was also an actor and a big movie producer at the time, and he had alleged ties to the mob. Sources vary on whether or not that encounter was friendly. Some say they were totally fine and they hugged, and others were like, oh no, they were fighting. It was awful, blah, blah, blah. So that's all rumors, but just take that for what it is. Then Roland West, her boyfriend at the time, did not go to the party and told Thelma to be home by 2 a.m. Thelma arrived at the party at 8:25 p.m., and at 1:50 a.m., she asked Sid Grauman, little name drop there, to call Roland, a big old name drop there. She asked Sid Grauman to call Roland West and let him know that she would be leaving soon to get home by that 2 a.m. time. But Thelma didn't end up leaving the party until 3:15 a.m. Thelma arrived at home at about 3:45 a.m. Her chauffeur, Ernest Peters, is the last person known to see her alive, because there are rumors.
Right.
And he drove away. But Thelma's body was discovered in her Lincoln by her maid, May Whitehead, on the morning of Monday, December 16th. So, like, a full day later. Thelma definitely died of carbon monoxide poisoning and must have been alive when she entered the garage. That is the belief. So, at this point, it's highly unlikely we will ever know what happened, of course, to Thelma Todd. It's been too long. But between 3:45 a.m. on December 15th and 10:30 a.m. December 16th, something went down. And everyone directly involved with the case and the original investigation is now dead. And all we're left with is the recorded statements and just basically rumors that were circulating. So there is still always going to be this huge debate. First of all, let's look at the accident theory. It seems like a perfectly reasonable theory. It's carbon monoxide poisoning. It was a cold winter's night. Maybe she got locked out of her house. She walked to the garage to warm herself up, making the fatal mistake of leaving the garage door shut, blah, blah, blah. So even in California, a December night could be chilly, so it's not that crazy. But once you look closer at it, the accidental death theory didn't really hold up because basically even if she had gone to warm up in the closed garage, it was a huge campaign, I guess, at the time, which I didn't know this, but people were dying of carbon monoxide poisoning on accident all the time in like the late 20s and early 30s. I think it must have been when you were like first discovering this even existed. So there were campaigns all over the city telling you not to do this constantly. So she would have heard about it. She would have heard it, like, multiple times.
At most it would have been like suicide.
Exactly.
Purposeful.
Like she would have had the knowledge.
Right.
It's weird. It's weird that she'd be like, this is fine. And also, even on top of that, like not even just the campaign, she had a huge interest in cars. She loved cars. She like was really into them, wanted to have the nicest cars, like talking about cars. So even more so, it's like, honey, you knew. So if it was, if it was just carbon monoxide poisoning, we're leaving it at that, then it was probably suicide. So, the other thing is, the biggest evidence against the accidental theory is that the condition of Thelma's shoes and her hair were basically still perfection. And the night after the party, when she would have gotten home, it was very, very windy and very, very cold. And her hair was still perfectly neatly styled when she was found in the car. And she would have had to spend a significant amount of time outside to walk to her car. Because unlike most people's garages they have them right next to the house. All of us do. Hers was like a hike. She had to walk, she had to climb 270 stairs.
That sucks.
To get from her house to her garage. It was like a totally separate building on her, like, her acres of
I would
land.
never go anywhere.
Never. Who wants to walk there? And, like, the stairs, they weren't, like, stairs. They were, like, dirt. So it's, like, her shoes would have been dirty. She would have had crazy windblown hair, but she looked, like, perfected. So there was a theory going around for a while, like, maybe she got locked out of the house and walked down to the garage to keep warm. But it was, like, no, she was in really good condition. She would have had to have gone, like, straight to the garage. And also her key was found in her purse. So that theory was kind of like, maybe not. So then people said, well, maybe suicide. Again, we kind of covered that. She would have known about carbon monoxide poisoning. She knows cars, so maybe she was doing this to herself. Near the end of the party, it was reported that she received an upsetting message from an unknown person. She had been receiving letters, I guess, the weeks leading up to this, threatening her. She potentially had a stalker.
Yikes.
And that somebody was, like, trying to do her in.
Yeah.
And also, there is the rumor that her encounter with her ex-husband was very negative. We don't know if that's true, but that was the rumor. And also, the chauffeur who drove her home that night said Thelma was unusually quiet in the car and told him she did not need an escort to her door that night, as she usually did.
Wait, so she had someone drive her home and then she got into another car?
She had the chauffeur drive her home, but then it's not known if she went straight to the garage or to the house. The chauffeur drove off because she said, "Don't walk me to my door."
Okay, so she didn't drive herself home, because that's what I was wondering. I was like, maybe she was really, really drunk, which she could have been if she had a driver.
Totally. And she had been drinking that night, but people said she didn't seem intoxicated. But the chauffeur dropped her off. But again, then this report came out later where it was like, oh, I normally walk her to her door, but she said not to. So then it's like, where did she go to when he dropped her off? Did she walk straight to her door? Did she go to the garage? Where did she head? So there were some bizarre things circling that. So the chauffeur said because she was quiet and didn't want an escort, that kind of played into maybe she was in a really bad place. And it could have been suicide, but most of the friends around her, really people in her like core circle, said all of her behavior indicated that she was looking forward to the future. She was in a happy place. Her film career was just at its peak, and there was just no way she would do this. So they are debunking this totally, but it's not impossible.
Well, I was going to say, what if the chauffeur made that up because he had a car? And he would have, he had a car, right? Obviously, he's a chauffeur. Yeah. So he drives up to her garage and puts her there, which is why she wasn't like dirty and disheveled.
Yeah, he like set her right in.
Yeah, and because maybe she was like a little intoxicated and he was like, hey, do you want me to come in? And she was like, no, don't do that. And he like was trying to force it. And then she was like, no. And then he like killed her by accident or whatever. And then
Mike, I love it.
And then put her body up there.
Mike, I love it. I'm so proud of you right now.
I love this theory.
And he made up that she said like, oh, I don't need an escort, because he was trying to like, obviously make sure he looked innocent and like he couldn't have participated. Because I just feel like if the garage was so far away, you would need someone with a car to get her up there if she was still looking so clean. And he's a chauffeur. He obviously has a car.
I know. That's like the most confusing thing of it, is that he dropped her off. I think it sounds like it's at the end of her driveway. And so it's like, even if she went straight up to her house, like she would have been, in so many ways, she would have been disheveled from the wind and like the dirt that's up in the Hollywood Hills. So I'm like, it seems like either he, as you said, like was involved somehow and made sure she stayed pristine and took her straight to the car in her garage, or somebody else met her almost instantly and like brought her to the car. But we're about to jump into some more murder theories.
I'll send you this link because there's all kinds of pictures in this link that I found.
Property.
Yeah, did you see them?
I was I have that pulled up on my notes, and I was actually gonna send it to you to post when this episode gets released so our listeners can kind of understand.
Yeah, because you see the stairs and it starts to like make sense now. It's very
it is confusing.
Very Los Angeles.
It's very like Hollywood Hills house. Like everything's like raised. But no, I was literally gonna send it to you and like allow for our listeners to have a visual while I told this story, because it does sound bizarre.
It sounds like who would walk 270 steps to get
It's all spread out, and it also, I think if you're looking at the right picture, it shows like where her like cafe is too, and how it's all like connected. But yes.
Okay. Murder.
So then, so we accidental, suicide, and then the murder theories come in. So if Thelma Todd's death wasn't accidental or suicide, that leaves murder or natural causes, because of course there had to be the initial speculation of, well, maybe she died of a heart attack, but no, that was ruled out quickly. It was carbon monoxide poisoning. Natural causes were gone. Officers found no signs of a struggle or robbery. Thelma was found wearing all of her expensive jewelry that she had worn to the party, and there weren't any signs of injury aside from a small amount of blood believed to come from her lip from when her head hit the steering wheel, which just points to the poisoning. It didn't seem like a fight had ensued or anything too crazy. But the possibility of murder actually came into the picture almost immediately, because Thelma's mother, Alice, arrived at the garage on December 16th and said, my daughter was absolutely murdered. She wouldn't have done this to herself. This wouldn't have been an accident, yada, yada, yada. But then for whatever reason, like a couple months later, she said, nope, never mind. It's just an accident. And like went back on her statement completely. And nobody ever found out why. So that was a little fishy.
Weird.
There is some evidence to suggest that Thelma may have gone somewhere else between the time her chauffeur dropped her off at home and the time her maid discovered her body, which this is like a very strong theory because, you know, there's just so much time in between the, like when she was dropped off, and it doesn't seem right that she was there the whole time. But during the autopsy, the medical examiner found that she had undigested peas in her stomach.
Peas?
Some peas! And a blood alcohol level of 0.13 at the time of death. And although Thelma had a couple of drinks at the party, by all accounts, it wasn't enough to get her drunk. As I said before, she was drinking, she was having a good time, but like nobody would have called her intoxicated. Like she knew when to go home. But the coroner who examined Thelma said that that kind of blood alcohol level would have stupefied her with just like the size of her body and, you know, all the things. Nobody at the party remembered seeing her eat peas. And I'm sorry for laughing, but like, who was just eating peas? It makes me laugh.
That's my go-to party snack.
A Hollywood starlet who needs to look skinny on screen.
Yeah.
That's right.
Peas only.
Peas only diet. Nobody remembered seeing her eat peas during the evening, but that was what was in her stomach, still just starting to digest at the time of her death. So this throws off the theory that she died between the hours of 6 and 8 a.m. on December 15th, which is what police believed at first. So could Thelma have gone somewhere else where she was served peas and a lot of alcohol? If someone had picked her up and taken her out again, it would explain how she ended up in the garage with perfectly neat hair and shoes.
True.
So the idea that she went somewhere else after being dropped off also adds up with some of the other theories from friends. So Thelma was set to attend a party on December 15th, the next night after the Trocadero bash. And it was thrown by this woman named Martha Ford. So Martha says she received a phone call from a woman she believed to be Thelma saying she was on her way and she was coming with a surprise guest. But Thelma never made it to this party. So was Martha mistaken about the identity of the caller, or was she truly on her way and then something horrific happened? Did Thelma ever really try to go to this party? So that was one sort of bizarre thing that happened the day after the Trocadero. And then another woman who was like an acquaintance of Thelma told police that she had seen Thelma in the passenger seat of a car being driven by a very mysterious man. But her claims were highly questionable because she said Thelma was wearing a hat. She was 100% certain she saw Thelma in a hat in the car with this mystery man, but no hat was found on the body, anywhere near the body, or like anywhere in the house matching the description that the woman said. So that also could have been mistaken identity, but still a strange thing that was thrown out.
Yeah.
Another thing that was talked about was that Thelma was mostly a very well-liked woman in Hollywood, but she wasn't necessarily loved by all. She was receiving very threatening anonymous messages. The person responsible for the letters, I guess, eventually was arrested and imprisoned and was believed to actually be in jail for an unrelated charge at the time of her death. So they sort of ruled that out, but it still seems a little questionable. And her chauffeur even stated in the past that she'd asked him to drive as quickly as possible because she was worried about kidnapping attempts from either this stalker or from other people that were threatening her. So Thelma did have a lot of enemies. She was always very weird about it, wanted to be protected, wanted to be escorted places, which again makes it strange when the chauffeur says she didn't want me to walk her to the door. But also, the fact that Thelma had a restaurant, which attracted many celebrity visitors, also made her a target for gangsters and people of the mob, as I mentioned earlier, that her ex-husband had ties to because they would maybe want to set up illegal activity in her restaurant, start some gambling, start a little casino. But she was adamant she didn't want any part of it, and this could have also given her more enemies on top of the weird stalker she already had. So this leads into the most popular theory that this famous mobster named Lucky Luciano, it is believed by most people that he is in charge of her death. Because around the time of her death, Luciano was operating out of Los Angeles, trying to gain a foothold in Hollywood's illegal gambling group. And Thelma Todd's restaurant was at one point a prime location that he had asked to set up shop through some of his little cronies. Thelma's ex-husband, Pat DiCicco, had mob ties, so it's very plausible that she might have crossed paths with Luciano at some point and had meetings about the restaurant. It is rumored that Thelma had dinner with Luciano at one point, in which she stormed off after screaming at him, and he was just left flustered alone in a restaurant. Again, we don't know if this is true, but is it possible they had a meeting, she turned him down, yelled at him, embarrassed him, and maybe he put a hit out on her?
True.
What? I heard you gasp. Were you going to say something?
I wonder, usually I feel like mob hits are pretty like, we'll shoot you in the head.
Yeah. Right. It wouldn't be
You know what I mean?
necessarily that in the car.
But
way.
I don't know that, so I'm Googling it. So go on. I'm just going to see mob hits.
Also, another thing to tie Luciano, he abruptly left Los Angeles about a week after Thelma's death and never returned.
Ooh.
So that's something to chew
well,
on.
Sure. Yeah, that's like...
So it's like, well, is it him? Probably. He's not the only suspect in her death. Roland West, the boyfriend at the time, later actually tried to claim he was responsible for her death, which again brings us back to my first story where we're like, why are you all claiming that you did it, you fools? But everyone actually doubted him because his version of events that led up to her body had total inconsistencies and contradictions. He was just clearly trying to make a name for himself. Again, it's like all what we were saying earlier. Everyone just wanted to throw their hat in the ring and like be somebody. So he tried to come up with his own story, but it just did not quite add up with what police were finding. So even many of Thelma's friends had reason to believe that West probably wasn't involved, even though he also had ties to the mafia and was more open to the idea of mobsters coming into the restaurant. But that just leads me to believe that like the mob was out to get her in general, and it wasn't necessarily like Roland snapping his fingers and doing it. But
Right.
Some theories suggest that Roland and some gangsters were waiting for her to come home so they could settle the casino matter. Who knows? And maybe they were the ones that picked her up and fed her peas and alcohol and then threw her in the car. But whatever the case, the mob tie is the most likely one. It could have also been the chauffeur. It could have also been Pat DiCicco, the ex. It could have been so many things. It is very much believed that it was foul play. As much as you could rule it as a suicide, and that's not totally out of the realm of possibility if she had been having a rough night. It just really seems like she was a happy person in general. And if anything, it seemed like she was more scared of who she was going to meet at her house when she got home than like sad and in despair and like it's time to take my life. It more seemed like I have enemies and people who are coming after me, and maybe her asking her chauffeur not to walk her in was like, I don't want you to be a part of this danger I'm about to get into, because I know I'm about to be met with like this really tough meeting from my ex-husband and these mob guys. I don't know. That's sort of where my head goes. I absolutely think it was a mafia man who was involved, but I think it would also explain why the mom suddenly didn't want to talk about it anymore. Remember how I mentioned before that she was like, my daughter was definitely murdered, and then she said, oh no, it was probably an accident. I guess Roland did the same thing. Like he like was all about like, oh, it was me, it was this and this, but then suddenly like would backtrack on things and be like, oh, never mind, it was probably an accident, she was having a tough time. And it's like, this happened to several friends and family members of Thelma constantly in the next few years as the investigation was unfolding. Like, people would come forward, they would give their information, which helped because they were learning timelines and stories and who was close to her, but there was always a little bit of backtracking then that would be like, oh, never mind, I'm going to shut up about it. So the public speaking regarding the case eventually just like came to a complete stop. Were these people silenced by the mob? Were they, you know, suddenly just forgetting things? We don't know, but it will always remain a mystery, and you can interpret it how you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with it's still happening today with people in Hollywood is it was especially bad back then for women because you would take pills to sleep, then you would take pills to stay awake, and your hours on set were unreasonable, and you didn't eat because you had to keep your shape,
You only ate peas.
Yeah, you did. You only ate peas. Like, you didn't have a personal trainer. You just didn't, most of them didn't eat.
Yeah.
And you hear this horrifying stories from these women about how, especially if they had a little bit of alcohol, I mean, they blacked out all the time.
Right.
Because they literally were on pills to keep them awake or asleep, depending on the time of day.
Right.
And they didn't eat. And sometimes they would literally just pass out.
Yeah.
So it literally
and that's like what the
could
coroner
be...
was saying with her blood alcohol level. He's like, she would have been like out of her mind. So I think someone was like intentionally trying to knock her out, whether they like force fed her the alcohol or were like schmoozing her up and like getting her to drink the alcohol. But it seems like someone was trying to like get her into a vulnerable state. But
man,
it's very sad.
So
I would
sad.
love to know the truth. I know. It seemed like she really had her whole future ahead of her, like not only with her acting career, but like she loved her little sidewalk cafe. And I guess because if you remember, this was mid-December, her the trunk of her car that she was found in was filled with Christmas presents for her friends and family that she was going to deliver in the next week. And
right. So it definitely didn't seem...
It doesn't
like
seem
a
like
person
suicide.
who was... Yeah.
It doesn't. It seems like she was like ready to live her happy life, but someone was like terrifying her and was after her. So it's very sad and also very frustrating that we'll never know exactly who it was.
Man, oh man. All right. Well, anyways, that's all the time.
What a downer.
Now that you're sad, now that you're lonely.
We'll let you go. That's how I feel after every true crime episode. I'm like, I'm so fascinated by true crime, but at the end I'm like, well,
I know.
See
and
ya,
it's always me who's
guys.
like, let's do true crime, let's do it. And then Ashley's like, I'm depressed. Why'd you do this to me?
I'm so sad. But for real, thank you guys for listening. That's all the time we have this week for Keep It Weird. Mike, thank you so much for coming back on the show and joining us.
Thank you guys for having me. I would literally not want to be anywhere else.
We love it. We love you. Thank you for adding so much. We needed the joy that you brought to this very sad episode.
You were the only shining light.
No, you guys did a really great job with these stories today. And I know that, like, I was hearing them all for the first time, and I just, like, I hope I'm like everyone that's listening, and I can't wait to, like, look up all of this stuff, because all of the stories today were so good.
Well, thanks.
We always love spending time with you. I know our listeners will be excited to hear from you this week as well, and we got another episode to plan now that we have our Ask Me Anything background edition coming
You'll
up
have to come back on.
I know that's going to be like the most dangerous episode of Keep It Weird.
It's going to be special.
I'm not sure what our episode is going to be next week because that is a while from now. But follow us on our social media at Keep It Weirdcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We try to keep you all up to date there on what we have coming up. We're also going to be asking a lot for listener stories for a lot of our topics this year, aside from ghost stories. So, for example, we asked people to share tooth and dentist stories and stories about crazy coincidences so we can share them in our episodes. So if you want to be involved in any of that, follow us on our socials because we do record our episodes really far in advance due to the nature of life. So Instagram's where it's at Keep It Weirdcast. You can follow Mike on Instagram at as in Mike. .dot J as in Jersey Shore at Instagram.com. We'll tag him and stuff.
At Instagram.com.
You can also join our Patreon at patreon.com/keepitweirdpodcast, where you donate $1, $5, or $10 to our show, and you can get a monthly newsletter, 2 bonus episodes a month, and discounts on merch, and shout-outs on our episodes, so check that out if you're interested. All the money goes towards producing the show and towards getting new merch and towards future paranormal investigations and travel. So every penny is used on this show. You can also check out our Etsy store at etsy.com/shop/keepitweirdpodcast if you want a t-shirt or hoodie to wear around town and show everybody how weird you are. Not it. What's our sign off this week? One of you.
Aww.
Yep, I gotcha.
Good job with the not it.
I know. I even touched my nose. I'm alone in my bedroom.
I just wanted to say, because I've said it once and I'll say it twice, but the sweatpants are so comfortable. You must purchase them.
Just our sign off
today.
every week.
And a fun game we're going to play. The first person to let Keep It Weird know that you purchased sweatpants, I'll buy your next pair for a friend.
Michael.
So just make sure you message and with proof of purchase, and I got your next pair.
That's the cutest thing I've ever heard in my life.
That is the cutest thing I've ever heard. That's like a buy one, get one free.
Keeping the kids on their toes.
But also, I love this because I know so many people, including myself sometimes, don't listen to the end of the episode because they're like, oh, it's just their usual sign off. I'm not going to listen. So this will really test to see who stayed with us.
Who stuck
I like
around?
it.
Who
You're
stuck
getting
around
free
to hear that
sweatpants.
button?
That's
You know
right.
what I mean?
You know what I mean?
All right, buy some sweatpants, and you get a free pair from Mike. And also, if you join our Patreon, and you're a $10 Patreon, you get a signed autograph
Of Mike and Carrie Underwood.
Those are on unlimited supply.
Yeah.
So as many people who want them can have them.
And keep it weird.
Mike Check is ready.
Mike check.
Michael Check is ready.
What's up? What's up? It's Mike on the mic, and I'm here to write you a check. You heard me right? That's going to be a Mike Check. Sorry. I'm ruining this.